Hello, just while we're waiting for people to join, I'd just like to go through a couple of housekeeping items. If you're looking for computer, phone, audio options, then please download the handout in the control panel on the right of your go-to screen. There is a mobile app for iOS and Android. Again, the details are in the handout. You will be able to submit text questions to our presenters today by typing into the questions pane, again in the go-to panel. So do please feel free to submit your questions at any time. We will be stopping to answer questions at several points during the session today. So I'm your host for today. My name is Caroline Ashley. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Sage, and I'd like to welcome you to our first Xcelerate event of 2024. We've got an exciting agenda planned, starting with an interview with Helen Baker. I'll just go over to the agenda. Helen is our Global DE&I Director here at Sage, and there will be an opportunity for a live Q&A following that part of our session today. We'll then be moving on to looking at how Sage people could help to support you with your DE&I strategy. And then really, what does it hold in terms of what's coming up and coming with Sage people in terms of our roadmap and other items over this next 6 to 12 months. And there will be, again, another opportunity for live Q&A with Andy and Lampros. So just a little bit more about our presenters. So as I mentioned already, we've got Helen Baker, who is our Global DE&I Director here at Sage. Millie Harrison, another member of our customer success team here at Sage People. And then we've got Lucy Albon and Andy Kane looking at the functionality and roadmap items. So let's get started with our interview with Helen, interviewed by the wonderful Millie. So here we go.
Your presenters today are going to be Helen Baker, who is our Global DE&I Director here at Sage. Helen's pronouns are she and her. And also myself, my name is Millie Harrison. I'm a Customer Success Manager here at Sage People, and my pronouns are she, her. Helen has auburn, curly hair and is wearing a blue jacket with blue jeans and brown boots. Millie has light brown hair, wearing a black top and a rust-coloured skirt with black tights. So today we'll be discussing all things DE&I related with our keynote speaker, Helen.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. This will be followed by a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please submit those throughout. Helen is the Global DE&I Director here at Sage.
Thank you.
I think if the first place we could start is perhaps a short introduction to your background and your role here at Sage.
Sure, yeah. I think even before that, I think let's work out what DEI means, because not everybody will know, I don't think. But DEI stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. And without all of those components, as many of the people watching here will know, actually you don't get that sense of belonging within an organisation. Actually, people don't do their best work either. So that's what the letters, the acronym stands for. So I've been here at Sage for eons, a long time. In fact, my kids joke that I used to ride a dinosaur to work. That's how long I've been here. I started off in customer services initially, developed my career there, then ended up in product engineering, where I did the lion's share of my career so far. And now in this role where I get to really embrace humanness and work out how we can make life as frictionless for everyone in the organisation as possible. And that's really, I'm kind of a human gardener. How can we create all of the different conditions that mean that everybody can here? So that's my role in a nutshell, human gardener. That's all you have to remember.
I think it's it must be really interesting as well, having worked in so many different areas of Sage, to now be able to bring that all together in your current role.
Yeah, I think when you're in a different role in Sage, you sometimes have frustrations that you want an experience to be different to how it is for a particular group of colleagues, and now I actually get to be the person that tries to make that happen. So that's a really wonderful part of my job. It can be emotionally really exhausting, but also extremely lifting in all sorts of different ways. But yeah.
Perfect. No, thank you very much for being here. So obviously getting into it, firstly, why is a focus on diversity, equity and inclusion so important when it comes to running a business?
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter what size of business you're talking about either. You know, it can be very small businesses, or, you know, businesses with thousands of employees. But fundamentally, when you have a business, you're trying to create a product or an experience in order to be commercially successful. And you know that everybody that's you know, buying or experiencing that is different. And actually, if you have groupthink within your organisation, if you have lots of people who are from the same sorts of backgrounds, you're not necessarily going to remain competitive in the market. You're not necessarily going to have the challenge within your organisation, within your teams, that really gets to an experience that, you know, outmatches what the customer is expecting. And that's what you're trying to do all of the time. So the more voices you can have in the room offering those different perspectives, the better. And that's really the whole point. And along that journey, you'll have the fact that it's just simply the right thing to do. You know, that there are a lot of inequities and inequalities in the world, and actually, if you can start to challenge those within the structures of your organisation yourself, then that's also a brilliant thing to be able to achieve.
So what challenges then, leading into that, may our customers face in relation to kind of implementing a DE&I into their business? And would there be sort of any risks or perhaps general themes around not implementing such a strategy?
Yeah, loads. I think if you're a larger organisation, you know, not necessarily the size of Sage, but perhaps somewhere in between, you might be lucky enough to have a person who has some dedicated time to actually be able to focus on this intentionally. But if you're a smaller organisation, the chances are that it will be a part of somebody else's, perhaps even their main role. They might not necessarily have all of the expertise. They might not have a budget there to support them. They perhaps don't really know about how you would create a strategy from scratch. And so those can be, you know, a number of barriers in the way to actually making change happen within any kind of business. And then as you scale, you know, when you go to those larger organisations, then it's about, it's not so much about not having the resources, it's about, well, which area do we focus on first? Because it feels like a big mountain to climb, no matter the size of your business, and it's an always-on journey. So once you start, you've got to keep committing and keep on improving, and that, you know, that can take away from the main, what you think is the main thrust of your organisation and your business. So lots of different barriers along the way. The risks, if you don't look at it, I think, are that there are many of your competitors that will be. And actually, if they're creating an environment where their colleagues are really innovating, where they are, you know, taking on all of those different perspectives and actually meeting the needs of their customers, that actually puts you on the back foot. And I know that, you know, all of the businesses listening in today don't want to be in that place, particularly in current economic climes. And so this is yet another lever to actually really support driving your business, you know, successfully.
No, brilliant. And so I guess we're taking that into consideration then. Where does a business start?
Yeah, that's what we were like at the start. Yeah. Where do we start? Well, I think the first thing, if you're a smaller organisation, is start where your people are at. You don't actually need lots of data to get started. What you need is people who are willing to come on the journey with you and to be open enough to share some of the barriers that they're facing. Yeah. And if you can start there and start to grow that, you know, that passion into change, then you've started. The next step from that really is, okay, so could I start to be more intentional at looking at all my systems and processes within my business, however big it is, to think about whether, you know, that process will be helpful for everyone in the organisation, or whether there's some people in the organisation that might not be able to operate that process or that system. And you'll only get that by actually asking your colleagues, by looking at the data, perhaps of some characteristics that you capture, and just seeing if there are any patterns or trends that maybe you need to ask more questions about. Once you start there, you open the floodgates, and as you grow, if you keep checking in with your colleagues and you keep looking at data, you gradually start to see where you need to slightly reshape how you operate. And that's the rewarding part. You start to uncover stuff.
Yeah, no,
sometimes before actually people are finding it problematic, which is even more brilliant. And that's the way it goes. That's how the journey starts, and you develop as an organisation.
The thing is that you've got to start somewhere on
Yes.
the journey and build from there. So obviously people are sort of then starting their journey. What types of perhaps data is then going to be sort of useful to capture?
Well, I think most businesses that are listening today, particularly if you're in the UK, would be able to capture sex assigned at birth data and age data, just as two simple data points. And I think probably in every geography you'd be able to capture that kind of information. And we certainly do in all of the geographies where we're doing the data work. And what that means is you can start to look at that data through a range of different lenses. So, for example, you can look at it through the lens of people progressing in your organisation, through the lens of the different roles that you have within the organisation, through the lens of your hiring, who you're attracting into your roles that you're advertising. You can then start to look at it in terms of things like your performance development. Who is actually progressing? Are they the people that we would expect to be progressing? And as you start to build this kind of story of a narrative of your entire organisation, you can start to see where there are pockets of further investigation needed, and then change potentially, and interventions. And that's the way we've started here. We started just with gathering data first and building that story and helping colleagues to really understand why it's useful and why it's needed. And then from that, we started just looking at representation. And then we realised that just knowing, how many people with different identities we've got isn't enough, because that's not affecting change. It's just telling you what you look like. Actually, the next thing is, well, how does that integrate with other data that we have in the business, and how can we make that work for us for the better? So I think it's about just realising that the data is there in order to facilitate change, as opposed to just showing you a pie chart of what your business looks like. Yeah.
And kind of leading on from that, and you kind of touched on it in your last answer, obviously people hear a lot about capturing, the importance of capturing this data, but the employees sort of might not understand why.
Yeah. And
you mentioned obviously about trust and gathering some of that information. Could you perhaps talk a little bit more around sort of that area?
Yeah. Trust is the basis. I mean, it's the basis of your culture as an organisation or a business, isn't it, anyway? But in terms of data, this is people's personal information. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are, there are always some kind of data regulation, which is basically saying, that's very special data. You have to be very careful with it. So the first thing that we did here at Sage was to build the narrative around why diversity, equity and inclusion is important to us as a business first, before asking for any data, because otherwise colleagues are like, well, this feels a bit performative, or why am I sharing this? And then on top of that, it's actually about, so what is it that we want to change, that you want to change? And then after that, it's okay, let's get some data so that we can baseline our activity now. And then actually we can start to demonstrate improvement and measure that and be really accountable for that overall approach. And so stating that why over a number of months and years is actually what builds the trust. And then attached to that is, okay, so how am I going to capture the data? What systems am I going to use? Where is that data going to be stored? And how are we going to make sure that it's either confidential or it's anonymous, and that actually our colleagues know that? And how are we going to analyse that, longer term, in order to get the benefit from that very special gift that our colleagues have shared with us? And so there's a lot of planning that goes on just to make sure that, you know, you're doing it in a really respectful way, and that colleagues are, you know, almost in control of their data as much as they can be all the way through the process. Yeah, and that's
control, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a sharing thing from their side, as to kind of giving that platform that if they want to share it, they can. But
Yes.
if they don't feel ready to, then
yeah,
they don't have to.
And you're right, because what we did here was to, you know, really help colleagues to recognise that if they don't want to share their data, that's okay. What they can do to still help us is to say, no, I don't want to share my data within the process, because that helps us, it gives us something, which is actually we've got a number of colleagues, you know, who aren't quite ready to share yet. And that means perhaps we've got to do more work in helping to understand them where they're at and which countries they're in and what their challenges are culturally, etc. So any data actually does tell you something. And we also, on all of the questions that we have, we say prefer not to say. So, you know, somebody might be quite happy to share something about their disability status, for example, but they might not be happy to share something about their gender identity. And so actually they might give us some information and then say prefer not to say on another question. And that ability to flex what people can and can't answer is important. And probably the final thing is, if you're operating in countries outside of the UK, which I think many of us are, then you're going to face into different legislation in each of those countries. So, for example, in the UK, we ask our colleagues about 8 or 9 different questions about all sorts of aspects of their identity. But we know that in Germany and Austria, we ask, I think it's 1 question. And in Spain and Portugal, we only ask 2 questions. And that's about, you know, their laws and legislation, and then we, you know, work with the teams in those countries to help understand how we share that message in a way that they'll be able to hear and understand and want to take part in.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's looking at those kind of local legislative areas and also kind of the normal methods of collecting that type of information, because what obviously works for one geographical location is not going to work for them all.
Absolutely.
And you've got to build the trust sort of across the business, especially, as I said, if we're a global company and obviously our customers are globally based as well.
Yeah.
And obviously you mentioned about rolling it out within Sage. Was there much sort of uptake initially in terms of the data that you were getting back, or was it a slow burn?
It was a bit of a slow burn, if I'm honest. I think we probably had in the first sort of take up, it was about 4 or 5% in the first 6 months, and that built over time to about 10 or 12% of colleagues. And I think at that point we'd rolled out to about 8 different countries. And through that learning journey, we recognised that we hadn't told the story enough. We hadn't really reassured colleagues, although we had worked in the different regions. We hadn't really set the communications plan up around it as well as we could have done. Some of it was done through COVID, so it was also quite tricky. But with every year that's gone by, we've got more refined and we've learned more and we've engaged more with colleagues around why this is important. And we've associated some of that work with our actual colleague networks that we have here. We now got, you know, goals that are set at our executive level team layer, which also helps because, you know, everybody's driving towards the same goal. And so now we're about, I think it's about 56% across all of our 10 countries as an average. But in our 5 largest areas, UK and Ireland included, and we're now at, I think it's something like 75%.
It's a brilliant uptake.
Which is amazing, but it's taken 3.5 years to get there. And I think that's the interesting and also hopefully helpful point to make, which is it's very rare that you can go from 0 to 65% like that, because it's not just a survey, it's not just somebody giving you a bit of their opinion, it's actually somebody giving you a bit of themselves.
Yeah.
And that can take quite a lot, especially from people who are maybe in underrepresented groups already, who perhaps don't like labels and don't want to be labelled. You have to, you know, explain why this is important, so we can give intentionality to our delivery of solutions. So yeah, it's not a quick thing.
Like I say, it's a moving object,
Yeah.
and it's something that's potentially going to grow.
Yes.
Grow with a business
That's
as well,
right.
especially when you're starting out and as you perhaps grow in headcount or open in different locations, it's going to change and grow with the business.
But to that point, the earlier you start, as you grow, it then means that's already an imprint in place, just as your business as usual within your business. So even if you've only got maybe, I say even, this isn't a small business, but say you've got 50 employees right now, actually, if you could start to talk about this and start to introduce it very gently, perhaps with data that you've already got, by the time you scale to 500 colleagues, it's become much, much more important to understand that demographic and have some control around it. And actually, this helps, and you won't have to do so much legwork, when you're already in a growth phase.
Perfect. So some of our businesses may already be collecting some of this data through sort of relevant touch points. What next? How do they kind of turn this data into actions that's going to kind of drive their business or perhaps performance forward?
Yeah, well, it is performance, largely, I think. So the first thing to do is just to have a look at what you're already doing with that data. So if it's data around, identity characteristics, how can you now build that into other data that you have around different processes in your business? So I touched on them earlier, being able to integrate your representation data with your hiring or with your exits or with your progression will really help you to understand if there's any aspects of any of those processes where you've got bias. So in your hiring, you might have 6 or 7 different stages from the moment you attract right the way through until the moment somebody joins your organisation. But if you're looking at the data of the candidates through that, then you can start to see, well, actually, maybe our panel system is a bit biased in terms of who we have represented on there, or actually maybe we're not sending our questions out ahead of the interview, and perhaps that means that we're excluding neurodiverse candidates from joining, or you start to interrogate your processes with a different way of thinking. Similarly with exits, well, actually, why is it that women between the ages of 35 to 45 are all leaving our business? Just saying that as an example, by the way. But seeing a trend like that might make you think, oh, actually, is it something to do with our family policies? Is it something to do with our healthcare relationship with perhaps the menopause and what we're doing as an organisation or a company around supporting women in that phase of their life? It's those kinds of things that data can start to help you with, and you can't make assumptions like I just have. You have to go and ask the colleagues once you've got those data points, but having them in the first place is the important bit. So I think it's just taking that data to that next level of integration. And if you don't have that data, but you feel you're a good kind of layout, you've got good foundations, then maybe the next step is actually looking to your suppliers who might be a little more advanced than you are, and actually saying, hey, can we partner with you on one of the programs of work you're doing? And just using some of their clout, if you like, to really support you on your journey. Maybe there's a charity that you're already involved with, and you could actually partner with them to learn more about the people that charity is supporting who are different to you. So there's all sorts of ways you can kind of start to grow.
I think that's the nice thing about it, isn't it? It's not just sort of internally what you can do, like you say, it's looking outside of the business as well, getting that additional perspective of, you might have one viewpoint on how to do the DEI strategy, but actually looking at other businesses and seeing what they have to offer can be kind of a real learning experience.
There's so many ways to diversify your business. If you've got a structure and an organisation, and those people have always worked for you, and they're not likely to change, then you might be thinking, well, how on earth am I going to bring different experiences into my organisation to help me? Because I'm not going to let all of those go suddenly just to fulfill a DEI objective, nor should you. But actually what you can do is to partner with other people that are working on some of this work, so it might be that you realise that you don't have a particular generation within your organisation. Well, actually think about apprenticeships, or go or offer day release for graduates to come into your business and just do some work experience, and actually straight away you'll get a whole set of different experiences and perspectives into your organisation. Go and partner with a charity, but actually invite some of the people using that charity to come into your business and maybe do some skills development with them, and actually again you'll get another set of perspectives. So there's all sorts of ways to do this, to really think about how you want to be as an organisation in this space.
Definitely, and I think it feeds into other areas, doesn't it, in terms of kind of those different opportunities, or exploring, like say with like apprenticeships, for example, things that actually you may not have considered previously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So, final question: what does the future of DE&I look like? What sort of emerging trends do businesses need to be thinking about? Is there anything upcoming?
Yeah, there's there's lots. I think the first thing to say is there's lots of companies that will be touching the edges of creating an equitable culture, but actually it's really important to get into the middle of the work and bring that into the core of your business. So, one emerging trend is stop being performative and start genuinely building this into the goals of your organisation, so that you give it the same level of attention as you would give the work that you're doing for your products or your services, actually, and look at all of those different practices with the same lens. So although that sounds like brilliant basics and not particularly innovative, actually, if you're doing it properly, that is really innovative in this field. But there are lots of innovations. Quite a lot of it is to do with tech, and I'm sure everybody watching will have heard discussions on the radio, or will have seen things on television about ethical AI, and how we need to understand who is building the AI engines that are going into all of the technical devices that we use now, because otherwise we could be bringing bias into those systems that are making some quite important decisions for us. So that for me it's exciting. When you look at ChatGPT, or you look at other mechanisms, wow, blown away. But it's just remembering that people made those, and actually you need diversity of thinking in that development. And so at Sage we're always challenging that. We're always thinking about that, and asking who is the team, and how is this being developed, and how have you built an ethical code into this. And I think that's for our customers, everyone to challenge as well. It's it has a place, but you've also got to remember the humanness that goes with that. So I think that's definitely an emerging trend. How can we use AI to support us, to help accelerate us, but equally to remember the potential for bias in there.
I think that's the thing, and it's such a prevalent topic at the moment in terms of AI, and it's just that's utilised moving forward. Like I say, not forgetting the human side of it.
Yeah, but it's exciting, right? So I don't know whether some of you may have heard about Copilot or be using Copilot on browsers. We know that we can bring Copilot into Teams. We also know that we can bring Copilot shortly into Power BI, and Power BI does a lot of our analytics on diversity data. So it could help to predict in the future, where our gender pay gap is going, or it could help to predict, whether if we continue at this current rate, whether we'll be representative of our population in the region that we're in. It can take data from all sorts of different places and give us perspectives that we just wouldn't have easily, before. So it is exciting. It's just being a little bit cautious.
It's a very interesting topic. I think obviously, as we've discussed, there's lots that our customers can kind of do in terms of those brilliant basics, getting those in place, but then so much potential for growth and kind of developing this area.
And I think if this becomes a topic that people want to talk about, and they actually are not sure about where to get started, then organisations like us have an absolute responsibility to say, tell us what you need, and we can actually put together some webinars or some discussion groups to help you on your journey. That's what we're here for, not just with the accountancy and the payroll software, but actually some of these other aspects that help build a culture in a business to help you to be successful. So maybe that's a nudge for future sessions.
Well, I'm sure our customers will be very interested. Thank you very much for your insights, experience, information sort of around this topic. It's been really, really insightful. So we will now be doing a live Q&A with Helen. So if you have any questions, please put them forward now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Perfect. So hopefully you all found that video
the interview informative, and perhaps gave you some ideas around obviously your DE&I strategy. So we're just going to move into questions. So we've got Helen with us today.
Hi everyone.
How are you doing today, Helen?
Well, I was doing okay until I had to watch myself on video, and now I'm not doing quite so well. Going straight to Slimming World.
Bless you. There's something about watching yourself back, isn't there?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Perfect. Well, we've got a couple of questions that have already come through for you.
Oh, fab.
So we'll dive straight in, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
So what decisions sort of have you been able to make using the data that Sage has collected so far?
Yeah, there's been lots of opportunities actually. So recently we've been doing some work around looking at gender representation across our senior levels of leadership. So straight away, all of the data that colleagues have shared with us has enabled us to get a really good understanding of kind of gender across our different levels, and therefore provide leaders with kind of aggregated data that they can use as part of their hiring conversations. So thinking about the pipelines and the early stages of attraction, just to increase the opportunity that, you know, we hire somebody with the right skills who also furthers our goals around diversity across the organisation. So straight away data is helping us there. Some more specific examples are recently in the UK, we wanted to do some work around menopause, but we weren't kind of sure, you know, what the shape of the organisation was in terms of our colleagues and what that might mean. So we did some work based on the question that we ask around kind of well-being and menopause and gender, and brought that data together, and that's actually helped us to support a business case around lots of benefit intervention, a policy, and support for colleagues within the business. And so, you know, it's like anything, there's lots of things to focus on, but if you can actually build a business case with data underpinning it, that helps to get it across the line and to get those things you know, in play with our colleagues. So that's another example. Last one, I think probably it's a good one, is around neurodiversity. So again, colleagues have shared information about you know, whether they're neurodivergent or not. And actually what we realised was we had a much larger population of colleagues identifying with ADHD, autism, Tourette's across the organisation. And that's led us to build out inclusion hubs with neurodiversity content, and very specifically geared to supporting managers and colleagues. And we didn't have that before. So understanding that, you know, gave us a focus, and that allowed us to prioritise that work. So it's really just really helpful.
Definitely, and it sounds like obviously a lot of that data is then kind of gone full circle of then supporting the colleagues, and they can see those tangible changes that they're providing that information, and real changes then happening within the business. Yeah,
and then it encourages actually, you know, when they're using that hub, they know that we listen to feedback, and so they'll give us feedback, and so it gradually improves that hub and that content through colleague engagement. So it's a lovely cycle to get into.
Definitely, and I guess that leads us on to kind of our next question, is that obviously with gathering that information, do you kind of ask for that information kind of at specific points throughout the year, or is it kind of accessible anytime?
Yeah, so we've tried lots of different ways of doing it, but the form that our colleagues can fill out in Sage People is always on. So colleagues can always go in and share their information, or withdraw their information, or change their information, you know, whenever they want to, which is great. But what we found is by just leaving it like that and not actually prompting with any kind of sort of heartbeat communication, if you like, it actually, this level of disclosure stays fairly static. So what we do is once a year, we do actually have a 2-week campaign where we talk to colleagues about and really remind them about, you know, why we're doing what we're doing, why we're collecting what we are, what has been the success and outcome of the data that we've had up to that point in terms of, you know, impact on colleague experience, and that normally drives an uplift of anywhere between sort of 10 and 20% of self-declaration rate. So by doing that once a year, you gradually then build that self-disclosure rate up and up, and to get to the point where I think in the UK at the moment, I think we're, as I mentioned on the video, we're at about 75% self-declaration now, which is over that 65% statistically significant kind of point, which means that the data that we're using then is giving us a, you know, an accurate picture.
Brilliant.
So yeah, so we found that kind of leave it always on, but just have a targeted period just to kind of remind and refresh people on the why.
Brilliant. And then it obviously gives colleagues kind of that flexibility, don't they, that if they perhaps then decide later on through the year that they do want to perhaps share more, they've got that opportunity as well.
That's right.
Brilliant. So for obviously our customers, the next question that's come in was, what was the first things that you perhaps need to consider when you first start collecting this data?
Yeah. Well, the first thing was what data can we capture where? Because being a global organisation, we had to think about kind of legality of it. So we actually worked with an external legal partner to support us with that. And once we had that information, it was also then, but yes, we might be able to capture some information, but culturally, is it appropriate in that region? And so we then worked with groups of colleagues around that to really understand, you know, their thoughts and feelings around that, and perhaps, you know, whether we needed a staged approach to asking and talking about this. And following that, it was about the data privacy and security aspect of the data. It was, you know, where are we storing it? How are we storing it? How are we making sure that when a colleague leaves, that data is safely disposed of and doesn't, you know, continue forming part of our reporting? You know, all of the pieces that you expect from, you know, doing a data protection impact assessment. And so we had to go, you know, make sure everything was very robust before we actually launched, and then, you know, had the narrative and the assets and resources for colleagues around it. So those were the starting points, really, is that, you know, what is it that we can ask, and where can we ask it? Actually, there's probably one more point, which is, what data do we actually need right now? Because you could ask, you know, in the UK, as we said, we now ask about 8 or 9 questions, but if you start off with that number of questions and actually you're not going to use the data, then actually it's probably best not to ask yet. So it's actually, you know, what things are important to your business right now, what's going to support your business growth. Ask those questions to start off with and build up that understanding and do something with the data. And then thereon after, you can then build over time as other things become more important to you.
Definitely. I think, like we touched upon, it's those brilliant basics in place first, and then you can build kind of from that starting block.
That's right.
Brilliant. We've got 2 more questions we've received. So if you do have any other questions, please pop those in, obviously, the chat. So this kind of perhaps links back a bit to the first question we asked, but what, if you want to perhaps add anything else to it, but what are the benefits have you seen as an organisation of doing this?
Yeah, I think the first biggest one that is about being transformative rather than performative. I think any organisation that is solely working from kind of gut instinct and just rolling out kind of transformation kind of in a blanket way will have some wins and successes, without doubt. It's better than doing nothing at all, but actually it's ultimately not necessarily driving the right change either for the people in your business or for your business itself. And actually quite often those things tend to fizzle out without a lot of impact. So actually, by having the data in the first place, you can be much more, I talked a lot about intentionality in the session, and it's about, you know, making sure that you're really focused on the right areas. You can root out bias with trends, and then that can help you to target the discussions you have with your colleagues and employees in your business. And then you can really start to understand what's going on and how you can make the changes happen. And that's where you get from just, you know, saying and having a DEI badge to actually being really committed to doing the work. So I think that's, you know, one of the major benefits. And then obviously it's the impact of the work. You know, if you're creating a really great sense of belonging and inclusion within your organisation, then that's a huge lever for high performance, because it opens up that trust, that ability for people to feel psychologically safe, that improves communication, that makes people feel that they can raise not only the exciting innovations that they've got in their minds and be listened to, but also actually the risks that they see that they want to mitigate for you as a business. So it just creates that competitive edge within your organisation. So the ultimate huge benefit of all of this is it drives, business performance in a way that not many other things can actually. And it's about you get that by just doing the right thing and really listening to people's experiences and making sure that they can, your processes flex to everybody's needs as opposed to perhaps just your own experience within an organisation. So it has, it just the benefits just keep yielding, I think, if you do it in a sustainable way, and data helps you with that.
Definitely. Brilliant, thank you. And then we've had another question come through asking, how are you capturing and using DE&I data captured through the hiring process?
Yeah, so we're not doing it in every country, but in the UK we actually ask questions, the same, or a subset of the same questions that we ask our colleagues. So that data is captured voluntarily. At the point of hiring, we send out a survey to our candidates, and that information is then captured in the candidate record, and then we consolidate that and aggregate that and look at that on a quarterly basis to understand where we're seeing trends around different diverse characteristics against our stages. So if for example we have a function where we're seeing perhaps a low female gender representation in senior leadership levels, then we can actually go back and look at the hiring stages of the bands at those levels and see whether perhaps there was a leak in the stage pipeline at the point of hire, at the point of attraction, or maybe it was actually at the second stage after panel interview, or we can actually start to see whether there's anything in our stages that could indicate why that might be, in addition to maybe market conditions, for example. So that then can start us on a point of intervention if we can see that there's any particular difference in the way that people are progressing throughout our stages. So that's how we do it, by a capture form at point of raising interest for a role for Sage.
Brilliant, perfect, thank you for that. And we touched upon, obviously, when we spoke about the future of DE&I, but one of the questions is sort of what would you see, or what are the major trends or changes that you've seen in the workplace in the last few years regarding sort of DE&I?
Yeah, I think we touched on some of them in the video. So around the kind of generative AI and that being introduced into lots of business processes now, including hiring, for example. There's now a lot of tooling out there that looks at anonymizing CVs, or looking at skills gap analysis, etc., to kind of support creating a more diverse workforce coming into your pipeline for any role. But I guess some of the other changes aren't necessarily technological. I mean, we're starting to see the shift of DEI not always sitting within people functions, for example, but heads of DEI reporting directly into the CEO, and DEI sitting outside of that, so it actually reinforces that it's something to address in all parts of a business. So that's a transformation that we're starting to see. We're also starting to see that shift in understanding around the language that we use when we're talking about diversity, equity and inclusion, because sometimes by its very nature it can kind of include one group but exclude another. And obviously what we've got to get back to is the intent of this, which is about making sure that you're thinking about actual people and about business challenge, and that diversity, equity and inclusion is supporting business performance rather than just being ethically the right thing to do. It's about a combination of those things. So there's something sort of starting to transform there about how do we talk about these things, how do we make sure that everybody's involved and engaged in creating respectful, inclusive organisations, that you're not marginalising one group for another, you're recognising that intersectionality of people within a team. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing being talked about in the media, for example, or in professional kind of consultations and webinars, etc. Those kinds of topics are coming up.
Brilliant, no, perfect, thank you for that. And then the last question that we've received through is, do Sage report on a standard suite of DEI summary level data which is shared with the business or used for decision making. They've said previously I've looked at recruitment demographics, employee demographics, once employed, and then looking at attrition and turnover by demographic. I'm wondering if there's something insightful that I could add to my suite.
That's a really great question. We also look at our performance development zones, so progression, so ins, outs and ups, I call it. Because that also tells you whether you've got any bias in the decision-making processes of your leaders. And obviously that's proportional to your population, but you can start to see whether there's any particular trends there. You can intersect that by age or by gender or by ethnicity or part-time working, tenure, all sorts of different things. So we use that within our suite. We use all of the other indicators that you've mentioned there. Have we got any others? No, I'd say those were your kind of standard set.
Amazing. Well, brilliant. They've said thank you so much for that answer, Helen. Perfect. Well, that's all of the questions that we've received for today. So that's been really insightful and hopefully, like I say, really helpful for our customers. So we really appreciate you attending today and taking the time out to come and speak with them.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, everyone. And if there's anything that you think of after, please let the team know, and I'm more than happy to hop on a call or send you an email with any thoughts I've got.
Brilliant. No, we really appreciate that. Well, thank you again so much for your time today. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Lucy.
Perfect. Thank you, Millie, and thank you, Helen. That was a really interesting segment. So yeah, thank you for that. I actually, prior to this role, I was a customer of Sage People myself, and was lucky enough to speak to Helen when I was a customer as well about DE&I. So no, really great to have you involved. Perfect. Well, just moving on to our next segment, we are going to be covering now how you can use Sage People to support your DE&I strategy. So this section will cover some of the concepts that Helen's discussed, but kind of, I guess, in a slightly more detail and how that relates to the system specifically. I've got some nice screenshots for you of my trial org and kind of how it can come to life. But kind of just to say, it will still be fairly high level. I think just kind of due to time constraints today, I just want to cover a bit of an overview of the things you can achieve within Sage People. And then in the handouts, I've got another document that links into the detail of some of these things. So how to build some of the things I'll cover. And then if there's any other information you need following that, then please reach out to your customer success manager and we can loop in on any extra detail you might need. So with that, I'm just going to jump to my next slide. So one of the ways you can capture your DE&I data is using HCM forms. And this is, as Helen mentioned, we use this to gather most of our DE&I data at Sage. As Helen mentioned as well, you can have that form available to your employees to fill in at any time. And to do that, all you need to do is add the relevant policies to your HCM form definition and have a form WX process enabled, and then it will be visible. However, it may become stagnant if it's just left there, so you might want to send a form out via the email, as Helen mentioned, that we do at Sage once a year. So you could do that kind of as often as you like using the bulk send form option, or you could set it up using an action event and trigger it off a certain date field within the system. You could also use your form to host some disclosure information to get the employee to consent to sharing this information. But again, kind of you might want to seek legal advice on what that disclosure statement might look like, as well as exactly what data you're capturing, as it can vary per country, as Helen mentioned. Just to note on that one as well, I have in the handout included a document that links to an example DE&I form with the XML text that you can simply copy and paste to create a new form. I don't think it's quite working right now. So when we upload the webinar, we'll get that uploaded in a new format so it's actually usable for you. So kind of as mentioned, as well as reviewing the disclosure statement, if you do use that XML text as a starting point for your DE&I form, you'll need to check the content is suitable for your organisation and your locales, that the language is suitable as well. And then also you'll need to consider if you need to add any email triggers and add any data links. So if you want the form to then go and update, I don't know, the gender field you've got on the team member record, you'll need to do a data link there so that actually goes and populates that, and then you can use it in your reporting based on the team member records. Perfect. So another way you can capture DE&I data is by using pulse surveys. So you could use pulse surveys for things like ENPS to check kind of how happy your employees are in general, well-being check-ins. You could even use them for feedback on internal initiatives. So if you are running any DE&I initiatives, use it for feedback on that. Or you could use it to capture DE&I data. So for example, gender, ethnicity, disability statistics. If you don't feel like you're ready to have that data linked maybe to the team member record and you just want to take a snapshot. So I know when I spoke with Helen when I was a customer, it seemed quite overwhelming to record that information on the team member record, do a form, gather all this data. So as Helen mentioned, you can start small and you might find that a survey is a good way to do that. And as mentioned, you can anonymize that data. So definitely worth weighing up your options. You might decide that using a combination of forms and surveys work for you on capturing your DE&I data or feedback on certain initiatives, or you might just decide that actually we're just going to do a couple of surveys to start with. So that's something to consider. I'm not going to go over this slide in detail, but just wanted to highlight a few of the differences between forms and surveys. So kind of the main things to point out really are, on the forms, you can ask more than 10 questions, whereas on a survey, you're limited to 10. But however, with surveys, you can anonymize the data, whereas you can't do that on the HCM form. So there's a few differences as well, as you can see from this table, but just to make you aware, different tools will have different use cases based on this. Now, just moving over to the workforce experience. So most of your team members probably have access to the WX, so our self-service portal, and will have access to their personal details. And it's just considering here what details you want to display, what details you want to allow the team member to edit here, and also, are there any fields you want to put in a hidden format? So for example, with this screenshot of Steve Pendleton's record, we've added some custom fields for his name pronunciation and his pronouns as well. And then also we've added his religious orientation as a hidden field. And all that is, it's a formula field to say, I only want to see the last 3 digits of his religious orientation, so that if he's pulling his details up and he might have a colleague walk past behind him, if there's any data that he might feel particularly sensitive about, then there's tools within the system to hide that and key that out if you like. As we spoke about, kind of, you can use the forms and surveys to capture data. You can also use the personal details WX process to capture this data. So Steve here has got the option to edit his details, so he might want to update any of this information. And the fields that you allow him to view and edit are all controlled by your field sets within the system. So on the handout, I've included some details around what those field sets are called and a bit more information on how to amend them. So this is something you might want to consider reviewing the fields you have available here. The other things that we thought it might be useful to mention is that you can also use field set mapping to hide sensitive information from maybe your managers. So you might want the team member to see certain fields, but not their manager, as it might not be relevant for them to know that information. You can also amend your field visibility in the HR portal using the Lightning App Builder and field visibility. If there's certain fields you want to hide there, that's something to consider. And then also you have got the option to have custom profiles with field level security. This one would take a bit more work and probably support from an implementation partner. But if that's something that you really want to think about, then please do pick up with your customer success manager. The next part we thought we'd highlight is your WX communications. So these screenshots I've got on the screen here are from the new WX homepage layout, which is going to be toggled on by default in our next release, which is happening from April. So if you're reviewing your internal communications and what you've got visible as part of that project at the moment, it might be a good time to think about what DE&I related comms you could include and what links you could show on the homepage for your employees. So for example, you could have articles about different DE&I topics maybe, or you could have policies. So here I've got a policy for creating an inclusive culture, and you could ask the team member to confirm once they've read it potentially. You could also use the external links section to link off to different platforms that might support your DE&I strategy. For example, if you've got an employee assistance program, you could link to that here. It might be to a third-party login, or it could be to just an employee assistance program brochure that you've uploaded into the system. You've also got your summary processes as well at the bottom of the screen, and you might not use these at the moment, but there's different things you can do with them. I think as standard you get summary processes for new starters, upcoming birthdays and work anniversaries, but think about how else you could use these. They can be used to literally display any information you like. I've had a play and used mine to display mental health first aiders within the organisation. So I've got there a carousel of all my mental health first aiders and their phone number as well. So that's another way you could think about using your homepage to support with your DE&I strategy. Perfect. And the other thing to mention is now getting a bit more into the data side. So Helen touched upon looking at your DE&I data and comparing it against other data, so your promotions, your performance reviews, etc. And if you are processing your changes within the system via HR requests or people management workflows, you can create some really, really nice reports and dashboards with these and compare them against your DE&I data. So for example, you might compare your leaver data with your DE&I data. So what groups of people do we have leaving? And then, as Helen mentioned, get to the reasons why they're leaving. Are you doing something as a business that's causing them to leave? Or are you not doing something that's causing them to leave? You could also have a look at probation success rate as well. So is there a certain demographic where their probations are being extended or failed? Perhaps you could identify some common characteristics that may require some extra support maybe in a certain area. So if you've got that data in there, you can use that. And then salary increases and promotions, you can use that to maybe identify bias. So from my screenshot here, you can see that we've got white males are getting more promotions than any other demographic. So kind of that might be a little bit of a cause for concern, but then you also need to think about what is that as the percentage of that demographic in your workforce as well, so that's all relative. But definitely, if you're not processing changes through HR requests at the moment, we definitely recommend doing this because the data you can pull from that is just amazing. You can do a lot with it. And then obviously, just to say on that as well, once you've pulled that data, then you can look to address those problem areas you've identified, as Helen mentioned. The other thing we can do with our data is we can pull all sorts of reports and dashboards, including gender pay gap reporting. Now, just to say, if you are having to report on gender pay gap for kind of legal reasons and payroll purposes, you might want to be using your payroll data for that. But if you just want to have a bit of a snapshot of the data in Sage People for analysis purposes, there are some great dashboards you can build. So you can build things to compare performance ratings, locale, department, and the pay disparity between them. So lots you can do here. You can create list views and formula fields to put employees into quartiles with regards to their pay brackets as well. So that's really useful. We do have a specific document on this. So Millie, who just did the Q&A with Helen, has pulled together a guide on building this gender pay gap reporting. So in the handout, we've linked to that. There are a few extra fields you might be required to create. So I'd say review that document if this is something you're interested in. And if you're stuck or have any questions, please do reach out to your customer success manager. And kind of similarly, that gender pay gap document that Millie has built can be tweaked for other things. So whilst it's built based on the gender, you could change the field you're cutting that data by. So instead of grouping it by gender, you could group it by, say, ethnicity and do ethnicity pay gap reporting, or any other DE&I characteristic that you've captured. So there's lots you can do with that, and it's really flexible. So just moving on to Recruit now. So you can use the system to capture certain data during your application process. So start that right from the beginning of the employee's life cycle, and then you can utilize the data you collect and analyze the types of people you're hiring. So lots you can do with that. You need to think of other things as well, like, are you asking applicants if they need any reasonable adjustments as part of the recruitment process? I think that's one that can often get missed, so make sure that that's in your form. And then, yeah, lots you can do with that, and then you can do analysis and pull that through when a candidate gets hired as well, so you can see who you're hiring based on the stats that they gave at the point of application. And then that can feed into later the employee life cycle where you're completing, say, an annual form. So just lastly, I thought it'd be useful to show you an example of a generic DE&I dashboard. So this is one that we've got built in our trial org. And this might help with that last question Helen had about the suite of data captured as well. So I think a lot of this was mentioned, but we've got gender average salary split, ethnicity, same with disability. You've got your number of colleagues registered as disabled, gender split of current colleagues, gender split of new hires, gender split of turnover, and the same with ethnicity. So think about what dashboards you could build and what data is important for your organisation and how you can use that to make your decisions. So I thought that'd be a useful note to finish on. So hopefully that was helpful. Aware it was quite high level, but we wanted to just make sure we covered the breadth of things you can do in the system, and I'm sure there is much more that I haven't covered today. So what I would say to everyone on this webinar now, if you're doing anything with regards to DE&I in the system that we've not covered today or spoken about, please do share that with your customer success manager, because the more knowledge we have about what great ideas you've had, the more we can share and help each other out too. So that is it from me. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Hi there, Lucy. I'm just looking in the chat, and at the moment we don't actually have any questions. So, oh, hang on, one's coming through now.
Perfect.
It was just to say regarding the data gathering at the recruitment stage, that would be really helpful. So that was from Hannah. So just saying, great, I think, for actually sharing that point there. So any other questions? I mean, I guess actually if we were to continue at this point, then if anyone does have any questions that come to mind whilst we're going through the next part of the session, then we can come back to those, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, so we're gonna hand over now to Andy.
Hi guys, thank you, and thank you, Caroline, and great job there, Lucy. Can you just ask someone to just go on mute? It seems to be a bit of an echo on the line, if that's okay. Fab. Well, thank you for joining today's session. My name's Andy Kane. I'm part of the customer success team here at Sage People. I've got brown hair and I have a brown beard. In this presentation, I'm going to reflect on some of the highlights from 2023 and then help you understand what to expect for the rest of 2024. Just before I jump into the roadmap, please note that anything we're going to talk about today is subject to change, so please don't make any investment decisions based on what we show you. I'll try my best to manage your expectations around features which we believe are a lower and higher level risk of movement. So 2023 was very much the year of WX2, and I'm sure most of you now will be enjoying the benefits of the new look and feel. I'd like to start by focusing on a few of the items which seem to have been overlooked by some of our customers. But before that, I'd just like to highlight that our old navigation, or WX navigation, will no longer be available from the Y24.1 release, which will be reaching customer production orgs from April. And the old WX homepage will no longer be available from our Y24.2 release, which will be deployed into production orgs from June. In terms of new features, we introduced new governance and approval settings for enhanced objectives, which bring the functionality in line with the old objectives. These are now available to use within your policy settings under the Performance Management tab. We introduced a WX widget for time off, which gives users easy access to key data from the homepage, including a quick link to the absence calendar, and also an additional widget for external links to other systems. We've also launched the first iteration of our profile page, which enables easier navigation to key areas of the team member data. We made a number of improvements to people management workflows, both from cosmetic and functional perspective, in order to bring the tool in line with the legacy HR request process. I know that quite a number of, certainly my customers, have been hesitant to enable this in the past due to some functionality gaps. So that, if that's been the case for you guys, then I would highly recommend revisiting. Another high value item delivered in 2023 was our integration with Microsoft 365. This included a key feature, this included three key features. The Outlook absence integration, in which employees and managers can automatically receive calendar invites upon approval of an absence. The Teams Absence app, which enables employees and managers to request and approve absences from within Teams itself. And also the interview scheduling, which reduces the time recruiters spend on scheduling interviews. The latter enables recruiters to see availability across hiring teams via the integration, which recommends suitable time slots based on a recommended date range. It also provides recruiters with the ability to define templates for easy communication to candidates and internal stakeholders, where they have the option to add a Teams link for online interviews. And finally, Sage People Payroll. So Sage People Payroll is now, we now have our own payroll module. So if you're looking to improve efficiencies and reduce errors in your payroll processing, then our fully integrated solution is now available for the US and UK markets. If you're looking to learn more about any of these features, then please either visit the Sage People Help Center or speak to your customer success manager. I can now show you our FY24 roadmap, and we've broken this down into two main threads. WX2 is at the top and other items at the bottom. And you can see from the arrows at the top of the screen and also the vertical dotted line where the second half of the year starts. So any items that we've included in the second half of the year are at risk of movement than those in the first half. I'll cover the WX performance, workforce insights and permission sets on the next slides in this deck. In respect of WX2, we'll be continuing the journey of enhancing the existing functionality by adding additional services to our new profile page, which will be available as part of our Y24.2 release. We'll then look at redesigning time off to align the look and feel with the WX2 design language, and also look to enhance the surrounding functionality. We'll be inviting customers to provide feedback from Q3 with a view to having a beta release available from Y24.4. So please ensure that you're signed up to be a design partner in the community, and you can easily find that by navigating through to the product tab and then selecting design partners, and there'll be a form which you can complete within there. Hopefully you've all seen the communications regarding deprecation of the old HR request WX process, which will be happening from Y24.2. In case you have missed this, we have replaced the HR request or the WX HR request with the new and improved people management workflows for submitting change requests via WX. For anyone who doesn't use the WX to submit change requests, don't worry, HR requests in the HR portal remain unaffected. So moving down to other items now, we'll be introducing inbound API connectivity for both time off and new hires. APIs are a far more efficient and secure way of integrating Sage People with your other business applications compared to the more traditional method of sending files via SFTP. Now, pulling absence data into Sage People from a third-party time management system such as a TNA, time and attendance, or workforce management solution has previously not been possible. However, the new APIs allow you to do this. The same actually now also applies for the new hires, where customers use a third-party ATS. Currently, the only import method for new hires has been via Payflow, so this will help provide a more real-time option. Following the launch of Sage Assistant this year, we're also looking to enhance this tool further and bring into the application itself, and you can see the chatbot item that we've included there. This means that users will be able to log cases and even receive recommendations on suitable support resources from within the HR portal itself. So this will negate the need for users to log into the community and help center independently from their workflow within the system. This particular item hasn't been confirmed as a definite roadmap item for this year. However, it does represent a direction of travel, or our direction of travel in terms of the support functionality and resources. Finally, we have highlighted on the right-hand side a few initial priorities for 2025, which are time off, org charts, HCM forms, actions, compensation planning, timesheets, and the EU time directive. Given that it's so far out, this is far from our final list, but hopefully gives you some insights into what's on our minds at the moment. The first feature I'd like to spotlight is the new and improvements to performance. As most of you are aware, we've been on a bit of a journey with Sage People Performance, which saw us creating the new performance management area, which is home for enhanced objectives, feedback, and conversations quite a few years ago. One of the most requested changes around performance is the ability to house performance reviews alongside the other features in a single area of the system. Therefore, I'm delighted to confirm that we'll be redesigning the existing features to fit with the new WX design language, along with the alignment of performance reviews. This will create a single point in the system for all things performance, and the unification of the performance processes will result in a simplified navigation for employees and managers alike. So we're currently working towards redesigning the performance reviews page as part of our Y24.3 release, alongside with the alignment with objectives. And then from our Y24.4 release, which will be the general availability release, we'll look to bring those in line with we'll look to bring in the feedback and conversations as well. We're also thrilled to announce the launch, or the beta launch, of the Workforce Insights in the Y24.1 release. This new feature addresses some of our most voted for customer requests surrounding reporting and analytics, providing HR and other business leaders with the tools they need to make fast, informed decisions with ease. Using the powerful CRM analytics platform, this initial release offers 3 pre-built dashboards covering headcount and tenure, performance, and time off. You'll be able to view headcount and tenure by country and employment type. The performance dashboards will display each country's performance rating and scores, as well as salary increases and status of objectives, while the time off dashboards will show requested vacation time versus available time off by reason, absence days over time, and much more. All dashboards can be filtered by country, employment type, and management level. Designed with usability in mind and bringing data to life in a way that's visually appealing and easily understood, we anticipate good customer adoption upon launch and encourage customers to provide feedback to help shape and extend this new capability. The tool is currently in beta, and we're aiming to make the first iteration generally available from our Y24.2 release. A new dashboard is making its way into the product very soon and is obviously very topical given today's webinar content, and is for DE&I, and you can see some initial designs on the bottom right of the slide. One item I'd like to just put on your radar for info at the moment is around permission sets. For those of you who are not familiar with permission sets, this is now the method of assigning user permissions preferred by Salesforce. Historically and currently, permissions have been controlled at profile level, and if you want to deviate from the standard managed profiles such as HR Manager, you need to create a new profile with the required permissions attached and assigned to the user. In almost most cases, this would require the support of a consultant and have a cost attached to it. With permission sets, you're able to build a set of permissions and allocate these at employee or employee group level. This provides significantly more flexibility when looking to make minor tweaks to certain user permissions. It is possible to base your permissions entirely on permission sets, and a standard Salesforce profile can be allocated to the user record to support with this. With this approach, the existing managed profiles effectively become redundant. Therefore, we've started work on some tooling which will help with the migration from profiles to permission sets. We haven't actually set any deadlines for this tool at this time. The tool we are building is currently in beta, and there's no kind of release date known at present. And we're currently working internally to understand how any such migration would look, and you can expect to receive more information in due course. Before we take some more questions, I just want to close this section by thanking you all for your ideas on how to improve the product. During 2023, we implemented a total of 25 customer ideas, and as you can see on the right, some of these ideas received a really high number of votes. So please make sure your voice is heard and share any ideas that would be of value to you, as it's highly likely other customers will feel the same way. If you're not aware of how to log ideas, all you need to do is navigate to the product tab in the community and then select the customer ideas hub. Here you'll be able to find more information on how to do that, as well as a link to the portal. We're always willing to listen and open to listen to your feedback, so please share those. So let's now take some questions, where I'll be joined by our product lead, Lampros.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the questions pane, waiting for questions to come through. So do any of our attendees have some questions for Andy or for Lampros, our product manager? We'll just give it a moment.
I was expecting the questions area to be buzzing with questions, as is usually the case on the roadmap stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully that means I've been very clear.
Well, you were very clear. Great delivery. So, oh, hang on. Okay, we do have a question. So this is from Helen. I didn't see anything on the roadmap slide about being able to configure your own workforce insight dashboards. Is that planned?
Yeah, so
Maybe-
with regard, I mean, I don't know whether this is maybe one that you might want to interject on as well, Lampros. Great question, Helen. At the moment, what we're looking to do is we're looking to try and enhance what is included in the initial beta release and the initial general availability release as much as possible. In order for you to have the ability to configure your own dashboards would require an admin license, which would obviously have a commercial implication and would obviously require a significant amount of training and so forth. So before we kind of get to that, I think where we're looking to go is that we're looking to get as much feedback on the beta as possible, and that will inform our decisions on where we go forward. Lampros, I don't know whether there's anything more you'd like to add to that.
No, thanks, Andy. You've covered it. Yeah, basically, our priority is to ensure that we can provide as much basically dashboards and reports and interactivity between these and insights on top of these out of the box as possible. However, obviously, now that more and more customers are starting to see it, it would be great to hear from you guys directly. Obviously, we know that out of the box is great, but also one size doesn't fit all. So we expect this basically to be something that comes out of feedback. The ability to, out of the box is great, but I want to also create my own dashboards, my own reports, my own filters. So please start using them, and we'll make the decisions according on what's the most common feedback received.
Thanks, Lampros.
Right. Okay, another question, a follow-on question regarding the dashboards. Okay, so this is from Freya. She'd heard that sysadmins won't be able to create dashboards. I think we've just covered that off. Actually, you will, when we get to that point, there will be a special license that's required. That's not part of the normal licensing that we have currently. So yeah, I think it's just a wait and see on that. Would you agree, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more of an if than a when at the moment. As I say, we're just gathering customer feedback in the moment, and that'll inform our decisions on next steps.
Great. We have another question from Helen. Are there any plans to make Recruit look more snazzy and, a word, Helen, fit within the WX 2.0 framework, I guess?
That's definitely one for Lampros.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, actually, the part of Recruit that's in WX is actually relatively small compared to overall Recruit and what Recruit can do, right? I think the main, the majority of Recruit is really in the back end. However, to answer the question, yes, 100%. Anything that is on WX and it's basically employee facing, so the parts of Recruit that hiring managers would use, and not necessarily just the recruiters or other colleagues in the HR function. And yes, that will eventually also move over to WX 2.0, because obviously we want everything to be in a uniform UI, a uniform experience with this new, snazzy, modern design language that we've started using in the first few processes.
Great, thank you, Lampros. Any more questions from any of our attendees? I think our questions are exhausted. Just one more. Yep. So I think that's all questions. Last call for questions before we come to a close. Okay. I think that's it on the questions. So I'd really like to thank our presenters today. It's been a great session, really informative, and you might have some questions once you've digested the information that we've covered today. So if you do have any questions, then please do contact your customer success manager, who would be able to hopefully answer the questions, if not direct you to the right resources to get your answers. I'd also like to thank you, our attendees, for attending today. You will be receiving a follow-up survey immediately after this session ends, and we would really appreciate your feedback. As part of that survey, we'd like to understand whether, if we were to move these types of sessions that we run on a regular basis from go to Teams, would that work for you as a method going forward? So again, that would be part of the survey today. So if you could take a moment to complete that, that would be really appreciated. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Thank you.